Looking to start a church, business, or nonprofit organization in 2022? Do you need help forming an LLC, applying for a copyright or trademark, revising church laws, crafting a succession plan, or developing a compensation package for your pastor and staff? Contact the law office of Travell Travis, a Richmond-based legal boutique focused on the needs of pastors, entrepreneurs, creatives, and our community. Let's make your vision a reality in 2022. Visit TravellTravis.com. That's TRAVELL Travis.com. If you're concerned about the future of your organization when you step down, then where will the mantle fall? A biblical and legal guide to succession planning is a must-read for you. It delves into the scriptural and legal aspect of succession planning, characteristics of successors, the people, the process, church bylaws, common myths, even issues with nepotism. Where will the mantle fall? Written by Richmond's own attorney, Pastor Travell Travis, and available at Amazon.com.
Good evening. Happy Memorial Day, and thank you for joining us tonight for this special Mental Health Awareness Month edition of Mantle Mondays. I'm your host, Travell Travis, and we're excited tonight about this conversation. We invite you to like, to invite, to share, to tag, to ask your questions, as well as subscribe to our channel. Tag someone in the comments. If you're a ministry leader, a pastor, a parent, and you're concerned about mental health, mental wellness, especially the interaction of faith and wellness, and as well as the church and counseling, I invite you to be a part of this conversation on tonight. I'm so honored to have our guest tonight for this important conversation. He is both a pastor as well as a licensed professional counselor. He is a clinician and a psychotherapist. He is the founder of the Calvary Community Church in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He is a friend, he is a brother, he is a father, as well as a husband, but he is a brother in Christ. And so it's an honor to invite tonight for Mantle Mondays, Pastor CJ Hoyle. Let's receive him on tonight. How you doing, Pastor? Happy Memorial Day.
Hello, everyone. I am on my way to better. I hope you and the viewing audience can say the same. Privileged to be here tonight.
So did you grill out today? Did you go to the pool, the beach? What'd you do?
You know, I had grilling on my mind, but that didn't quite make it into my agenda. So I just actually went to the local park and played some ball, came back and rested, and I've just been chilling out. You know, I didn't want to do some of the traditional things, care for my dog, and just kind of chilled out with everybody here.
I think that's so important. I went to the store this morning. I purchased this stuff just in case.
See,
but it didn't happen.
There it is. There it is.
So I said, all right, to my wife, if you want to grill it, or you just want to cook it in the kitchen like we normally do, if you want to do it all today or spread it out over the week,
it's all good either way. Yeah,
you got options.
I was scared to go to the store on the day of because I figured I'd be disappointed. But just thought folks would run through everything. But I can appreciate, going for that plan B.
Well, my disappointment wasn't that the shelves were empty. My disappointment was the price of the food.
Oh, well, that's a whole nother conversation.
new stress.
Everything's going up, they say.
The price of chicken wings and hamburgers and oh my God.
Yeah.
I saw somebody said that if they grill or do a cookout, it'd be virtual because they can't afford to feed everybody.
Yeah, I've heard that about the gas too. Absolutely. So understood.
Well, let's ask a couple questions. We talked about gas prices. We talked about food prices, pandemic, wars, mass shootings. What are you seeing from a mental health standpoint right now? Are we worse than before? Are we on the verge of a corporate meltdown? Or are you seeing awareness, emerge in such a way that is actually stemming the tide that otherwise would have been there, but for this increased awareness for mental health?
I think we're on the wave of worse than before. And the reason I would say that is, unfortunately, particularly in the Western part of the world, we have normalized complex and recurrent trauma.
Hmm.
And it is so um, normal, and it is so not sensational anymore that we're absorbing it as if we are designed psychologically, emotionally, socially, or spiritually to absorb um, trauma at the level we absorb it, and we're essentially continuing not just with life as it is, but at the pace of life that is really ingrained in this part of the world. What am I talking about when I say the pace of life? I'm talking about attention shifting, or what we would call multitasking.
Hmm.
Not even having a moment built in for us to actually attend to what we're absorbing. It's almost like you take the lick and then you move on to the next lick. And you do that until you are no longer here, and then the next person steps up in the same kind of pace and just absorbs over and over and over again the ills that confront us. And while there's
But
an increase in awareness, I think there is also an increase in pressure to normalize, and I say this seriously, but also partially in jest, to learn to live with trauma as opposed to healing from it.
wouldn't we historically say that just being tough and resilient,
Hmm.
that hey, you could take a lick and keep on ticking, but you're saying that that's not always healthy.
Absolutely. It's absolutely not healthy. And that's one of the things that drew me into this field and drew me into the work that I perceive to be just as much of a calling as the pastorate. Um, is that while the mind, I respect the power that the mind has over the body, and that's God's idea and God's design. And I respect the resilience of the mind, but the mind, just like humanity, while it is resilient, it also carries a fragility. So there is this interesting tension between something so resilient, yet at the same time being so fragile.
Hmm.
And if we don't steward both properly, we certainly can have some catastrophic consequences. Mental illness being one of them, and certainly mental health, which they're not the same. They impact mental health, that is, impacts the larger majority of the populace. Both of those can have very catastrophic consequences when we don't steward them particularly well.
So
And I
when you
think
say
that's important
steward,
to know.
so when you say steward the mind, I'm thinking two things. Is it that we've just dismissed the mental health, or is the mind such a complex organ we've yet
Mm,
fully we fully understand it to know even how to treat it? We understand kidneys. We
hmm.
understand arguably the heart. This is what it does. This is what it looks like when it's not doing it right. Here's what we
Right.
can do to fix it. Is the brain such a complex organ that even the best have a hard time understanding how it works, and therefore, without the lack of understanding how it works, don't have a grasp of even how to keep it healthy or to treat it when it's ill?
I think it's certainly more of the latter. Not so much a dismissing, but a lack of understanding and even a lack of appreciation
Hmm.
for the complexity and the profundity of the brain, of the mind, and how mental health care is just as crucial as physical health care or spiritual health care. And they're all interrelated. And so when you think about, even as you brought up the body, kidney, for example, there are physicians, there are scientific researchers who give their entire career
Hmm.
not to the whole body, but to a
Hmm.
specific part. The age of generalists is far gone. Now we have specialists who will spend their entire career on the eye
Hmm.
or on the kidney or on the heart. And I don't think we have that same yet. We don't have that same level of appreciation and um, really fondness even for individuals who've devoted their lives and their career to the understanding of mental processes and behavior. That's still very much an afterthought, as opposed to the esteem we would give
Right.
a medical doctor who specializes in studying just one part of this complex body.
Is that because it's more of a behavior science than a hard science? But it is a hard science, but it's
Mhm.
not perceived as,
Yeah,
oh, you're a doctor, but you're that kind of doctor, where we're this kind of doctor.
right.
Is that part of the stigma?
I think so because psychology, which of course is the large umbrella where the outpatient inpatient mental health world stems from, is considered a social science, which is one of the soft sciences.
Hmm.
So it's not a hard science, so it doesn't have that sort of reputable historic standing that, say, a biology, a chemistry, a general sort of healthcare branch. When you look at the physician world, even the nursing world, don't have the same kind of historical esteem. But what's interesting is the mental health treatment world does have a rich history, though it,
Hmm.
even in this part of the world, has a rich history that, believe it or not, overlaps with the faith community, particularly Christian communities. Yet that rich history has not, for whatever reason, given us a comparable level of esteem. I think that's changing and has changed recently. But we got a long way to go and a lot of ground to cover to be seen in a similar light.
Has the church historically? I know you mentioned that about the church's role and perhaps getting greater appreciation for the mental health community. Do you
Hmm.
think how much has the church been the problem when
Mm,
it comes to this area? Because we don't consider a heart attack, we don't consider a stroke, we don't consider uh, malfunctioning kidneys or cancer as demonic. Maybe perhaps spirit of infirmity, devil's attacking, but not. Whereas on the mental side, so long it was considered demon possession, a spirit or a lack of
mhm.
faith, a lack of God. Has that, even if everybody's not Christian,
Sure.
just that belief is so embedded in the culture. Has the church almost been, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I'm not gonna put you there, Bishop. I got you. I got you. I think that's a loaded question that carries a loaded response. Um, Historically, I don't think that the church has been as problematic as we have seen in from a recency perspective.
Mhm.
When I say historically, I mean just looking at this country and the history of this country and the history of mental health treatment, even stemming into perhaps other parts of the world. What you'll see is a common theme and a common overlap. Back when, um, to support what you are saying, those who were mentally ill were seen as monoliths in very black and white terms. Demon possessed, lunar,
Mhm.
crazy, not fit for society. Once the societal pulse began to move towards um, actually housing, actually institutionalizing them, it was the church. This is historical. This is
Okay.
empirically supported. It was the church who was at the forefront of actually providing care, providing
Okay.
support, providing love, providing intervention for those who were essentially cast out of
Mhm.
society. It
Okay.
was the faith community which was a part of pushing for the humanizing of
Okay.
mentally of
Okay.
individuals who grapple with mental illness. So even some of the laws that we see in place now regarding restraints and regarding hospitalization, the fact that you can't hospitalize someone except in very rare cases against their will. There's a real push for voluntary hospitalization. The notion of patient rights, the notion of you only being allowed to keep someone in seclusion for a certain number of moments. The All of that, which was an outgrowth of activism, had the church at the core and at the center of it. Because again, the societal push and the societal solution was just place them somewhere
Right.
outside of the world of everyone else who's functioning normally. But the church historically saw it as a part of our not just evangelistic witness,
Mhm.
but Christian duty to love the least, the last, and the lost. And so I think what we see in a recency, from a recency perspective, is we have lost that tremendously. We've
Okay.
lost that sense of obligation and duty to serve and to care. And so our position often is, if we can't evangelize it out of you
Uh-huh.
or cast it out of you, then we don't know what to do with it. And we sort of repeat the societal push of, well, let's just place it somewhere out of sight, out of mind, for someone else to deal with, without examining what exactly is our role in supporting those who are grappling with mental illness or who are experiencing a deterioration in their mental health. Do we have not just a civic and societal and professional duty, but do
Right.
we also have a disciple that hits at the heart of being a duty, rather, that hits at the heart of being a disciple of Jesus Christ, like again the church historically presented.
I was thinking as you said that I think we don't do well with different.
Mm-mm.
Like you can have heart disease, but long as you're, I guess, act what we say normal, we know how
Yeah,
to deal with you even with your illness. But because mental illness often makes a person different, we don't know how to handle different. So therefore, as you said, we out of sight, out of mind, get it away
yeah,
from the
we dismissed
rest
it.
of us. And I think changing that stigma that just because someone does have a different degree of mental health doesn't mean that they're not, like you said, human,
Hmm.
not in need of love, compassion, sympathy, shouldn't be ridiculed or mocked or made fun of, but we should be all assisting in serving and helping. So let me ask you specifically, um, have you ever felt, I'm going to speak church broadly, and I'm going to bring it even closer to home, the Apostolic Pentecostal African
Sure.
American Church. In what ways do you feel like the church has worked against you? In what ways do you feel like the church has supported you? And then I'm going to follow up with a question: what would be the ideal relationship moving forward?
Sure, sure. So I think in terms of opposition, this was earlier on. There was certainly discouragement, both the overt and covert, um, for me to actually pursue my path of study.
Okay.
So I ended up being a licensed professional counselor, but my first choice was to actually be a psychiatrist. I was, all gung ho on going to medical school and specializing in psychiatry and going just the full way. And I can remember those within the apostolic Pentecostal world and even those without, um, really coming at me in their own ways, suggesting that um, this is a conflict between my salvation and my professional ambition. I'm sure you've heard similar things. How
Yeah,
can you
but I
be?
understand mine. Jesus said the lawyers are going to hell. Now the question is, what was the issue? Was it a issue of education,
It was
or
an
was
issue.
it specifically this field?
Well, it was an issue of the broader field. It was the issue of, again, this is a science that has to deal with um, mental processes that govern behavior, and so the notion that I was going to study the mind was heresy. It was essentially, you're learning how to manipulate people.
Wow.
You're on the line of witchcraft. You're going to go learn how to take people's choices away from them, how to control people. We got Jesus. We don't need that. He's the mind regulator. You don't need to be in that world. It's not your job to regulate all of these
Wait a minute.
sort
Those,
of.
those things were just, you just read that in between the lines. No one actually said that to you.
I wish I was reading it between the lines. No, I heard that commentary again, within and without the
Wow.
apostolic Pentecostal world. The whole notion of, do you have a God complex, little g? You know, and again, this is a part of what has continued to perpetuate, and that is the stigmas associated even today, where I think so much improvement has been made corporately for us to embrace and welcome and integrate even this platform. And our conversation tonight is a great example of that. There's still the perpetuation of stigma, and some of those stigmas have to do with um, difficulty with answers that are not black and white.
Mm-hmm.
So mental health plugs you into, just as does our faith, by the way, it plugs you into the reality that there is nuance and there is gray in the human condition. It's not all black and white. And so as you mentioned earlier, with comparing maybe a medical doctor who specializes in some part of the physical body,
Mm-hmm.
let's juxtapose that with a clinician who specializes in treating the mind, the emotional self. Um, the course of treatment for that general medical professional is usually going to be pretty black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Modified diet, exercise, take this medication, come back for blood work, follow up. It's going to be pretty
Mm-hmm.
structured in black and white. Whereas for a therapist, it's not always black and white.
Right.
It can be
Right.
very nuanced. That general medical professional can take 5 diabetes patients and give
Mm-hmm.
them essentially very
Right.
much similar
Right.
plans of treatment. Such is not the case in the mental health world. It's very nuanced. It's very gray, and there is quite a bit of exploration. That's a part of the work. Seeing what's going to actually meet your needs as determined by how it fits you, as
Right.
opposed to simply what the science says. So we have to deal with what is empirical, but also
Mm-hmm.
what fits that particular person. And you don't have to see that as much in the hard sciences. In terms of how the church has helped me, I think, as I've shared, um, the recent provision of opportunities, the
Mm-hmm.
tide is sort of turning, and so it's
Okay.
becoming more and more trending in vogue to
Mm-hmm.
bring this into the active ministry work. There was a time that something like this, I think, could have happened, but it would have happened sort of as an outlier in ministry. Now it's becoming integrated very much into the core, into the pulse.
What,
There are churches who are having these type of conversations
right.
in lieu of like their Sunday morning service. Their Sunday morning service is one of these. Like that's a big sort of about face and pivot from maybe what you might have seen in years past. And I think
Was that a
lastly,
moment? Was that a moment or event that you saw when it changed? Was it a certain year? Like, when did that pivot happen? Do you recall?
I don't recall it being a certain year, but I would say the event that I think really shook the church was, I don't know if you or the series of events. I don't know if you recall with the same clarity I recall, but there was just a few years ago, um, seemingly a rash uh, trend of
Mm.
pastors
Right.
attempting and some
Right.
actually completing suicide.
Right. Right.
Um, and I think that really shook the church in a way that in the postmodern world we hadn't been shaken from a mental health perspective. It's
Okay.
sad, but remains to be a substantive truth that so much of what shakes the pews is received differently than what shakes the pulpit. And I think
Wow.
what shook the pulpit um, really grabbed the church in a way that unfortunately our parishioners have been suffering for years. But
Mm.
when it started to hit the head, the strong man, the expert, the shepherd, in ways that we couldn't, again, with black and white
Right. Right.
explain, then I think that's what shifted our embrace.
But now you're a theologian. You're a pastor. you're also in this field. I know, at least from philosophy standpoint, hasn't it been anti-faith and religion? So is some of this, I guess, hostility on both sides,
Mm.
or am I as an outsider stereotyping the field?
No, I think there has been a hostility, but I don't think that again, I don't think that hostility is historical. I think
Okay.
that has developed in a modern and postmodern sense, particularly when you're talking about postmodernity. That's the
Mhm.
questioning of all truth. There is no truth, right? So
Right.
we're all hostile against everything that claims to be true,
Okay.
particularly our faith, which proclaims unapologetically that there is
Right.
not only truth, but there's
Right.
only one truth, and that truth is a
Right.
person.
Right.
That puts you on the bullseye, so to speak, of postmodernity. So there's a hostility, but I think the way forward with collaborating and understanding one another from a like mental health and church
Mhm.
standpoint is to understand first of all our opportunity to collaborate.
Mhm.
Mental health, I think, when stewarded properly, can serve as a bridge towards spiritual health.
Mhm.
And I'll say that again and just kind of define what I'm sharing. When I say mental health as opposed to mental illness, mental health refers to one's current emotional, psychological, and well being. That
Mhm.
includes, but is not limited to, how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. So, mental health is speaking about your current status
Okay.
psychologically, emotionally, and socially. So, mental health is for everybody. Mental
Mhm.
health impacts everybody. Mental health encompasses everybody. When you talk about mental illness, you're no
Okay.
longer just talking about one's status. Now, with
Okay.
mental illness, you're talking about a diagnosable medical condition
Okay.
that explains or helps to explain the disruption of one's ability to think, feel, and behave. That
Mhm.
disruption shows up in the form of a difficulty completing very routine daily activities.
Okay.
So we're
Okay.
talking about mental health. It's important that we understand we're not synonymously talking about mental illness.
Mhm.
And so this is why I can say I think that mental health serves as a bridge for spiritual health, because once we support, encourage, and actually
Mhm.
guide individuals into the strengthening of their psychological,
Mhm.
emotional, and social well being, um, it is common for them to acquire, while at the same time strengthen those three aforementioned areas, a
Mhm.
receptivity to other parts of their health,
Gotcha.
including spiritual health. And I
Gotcha.
think that this helps answer some of our issues sometimes in the church world with regard to evangelizing those who seem to not fit the
Mhm.
predetermined classes that we believe need to be evangelized.
Right.
The
Right.
individuals who are struggling with basic needs, the
Right.
individuals who are grappling with the cares of this world. What about individuals who don't necessarily fit that class, but are very much trying to strengthen their mental health? We can partner certainly with the mental health world by
Mhm.
serving as that bridge and allowing um, those who are being strengthened to link with the spiritual health
Mhm.
care that the church has been authorized to provide. And I think that's so important because as a clinician, when someone's time is coming up
Mhm.
in the treatment relationship, when we have gotten to the end of an episode and we're getting ready to step that person down to a lower level of care or terminate the relationship at a mutually agreed upon time, one of the things that we're always looking for is, does that person have what we call natural supports? Not
Right.
individuals to serve as a substitute us, but
Mhm.
individuals that can continue to support that individual while they continue to work independently. Guess where one of the greatest places of
Mhm.
natural support exist a healthy
Right.
church. So we can serve as a bridge in that way. But I also think from the mental health world to the from the church world to the mental health
Mhm.
world, um, the church can use and should use the mental health world as a resource. The mental health
Right.
world should use the church as a bridge. The church
Hmm.
should use the mental health world as a resource. And the reason I say it should be used as a resource is not simply for individuals who are mentally ill. That goes without
Hmm.
saying at this particular juncture. But even those who are interested in preventively strengthening their mental health, particularly when it comes to wrestling with questions about their faith and their
Hmm.
personhood. I don't know if you know this, Bishop, but church is not always the best place for questions,
Right. 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 Right.
particularly if
Right.
you have questions about your faith or
Right.
about your personhood. And
Hmm.
so the mental health world is a great place to funnel individuals who have tried to go through the spiritual mechanisms and just aren't getting what they need with regard to satisfying these questions. We've got a companion. We've got a divinely sanctioned companion in mental helpers, to come alongside and provide you that opportunity to wrestle in a way that isn't going to give you a badge or a
Right.
scarlet letter in the congregation.
So that was even my follow-up question to that. You talked about partnering and when perhaps I guess that transfer should go both ways.
Yes,
That
yes.
as a pastor, okay, I've done what I can do. I need to refer you to a
Hmm.
little bit more trained specialized help. But then, as you say, this person has progressed and perhaps being weaned off,
Hmm.
but you need that loving, supportive community.
Yes.
How can the church be that loving, supportive community? And how can the church know or a pastor know when this is beyond me?
Great questions. So I think number one, we have to be honest and be unapologetic about our limitations.
Okay.
Um, Jesus is all sufficient. We are not. A word for pastors, as being a pastor as well as a clinician, my ongoing guidance continues to be, um, the ACA, the American Counseling Association. It communicates to all clinicians from an ethical standpoint, the zero tolerance and dangers of engaging in what they call dual relationships, which
Hmm.
basically means that it is unethical for you to function as more than one thing to someone you are serving.
Wow.
And though that is a professional principle,
Mhm.
I've taken
Mhm.
that and really
Right.
merged and wrestled that into my theology with
Right.
regard to even counseling.
Right.
So I would say to pastors, if your engagement in counseling someone is going to pull you out of being pastor into being something else, then that's a good sign that
Hmm.
you need to refer out.
Okay.
If this problem and concern is now pulling you from pastor
Hmm.
to pretend MD, refer
Right.
out.
And that's
If it,
really for any pastor, anything,
yes,
whether it's legal, financial,
sure,
medical. You shouldn't be someone's financial advisor. You shouldn't
no,
be someone's attorney.
yeah,
You shouldn't be someone's contractor. I mean, you're giving investment strategies. Like, hey, you're
none of
here
that.
to teach me in the faith.
Yes,
You can get biblical principles,
yes,
but hey, you go to the train
that's it.
train
That's it.
professionals when it comes to that. Because otherwise, as a pastor, you're looking at perhaps clergy malpractice
Mm,
because you feel as the representative of Jesus, as you said, you got to be the savior of the world, and that's
exactly.
not your job.
Exactly. And then from a church community standpoint, in terms of how we can be that support, I think,
Mhm.
that comes with knowing our divinely ordained lane is to come alongside someone who is progressing on their own therapeutic journey and
Mhm.
provide them with that love and that care and that engagement that not only humanize them, but promotes their worth, promotes their value, promotes their significance as an individual who didn't choose what they're
Hmm.
grappling with. Okay,
Well,
uh,
mhm.
and because um, you didn't choose it, it's I think it's really important for you to have a constant reinforcer that this is not only not your fault, but it's also not your load to carry alone. I love
Okay.
the biblical command for us to bear one another's burdens, and then that's followed up with the notion that everybody ought to bear their own load. Not contradictory at all.
Hmm.
The notion, of
Hmm.
course, being when you can't carry it alone, we're supposed to
Right.
help you. But you're supposed to progress to a point where you can manage this more independently than maybe you could before, so that we can be freed up to help someone else. So it's the same kind of dynamic of, again, providing support, not
Hmm.
therapy,
Right.
support, not prescribing medication, support, not giving you
Right.
the 12 steps you need to get better. It's not our job. Our
Right.
job is to wrap around you in agape and be there to humanize and to help and to hold you up as you continue to be strengthened.
But what is the, I guess, the ethics of confidentiality and disclosure, even in that regard? If you come to my church and I know you're diabetic and you start acting a certain way, we know get you some candy, get you some juice because we know you're diabetic.
Yeah,
How do I know? Okay, this person is schizophrenic, bipolar, deals with depression, saints, sister so and so battles with this, so therefore be careful what you what how do you
yeah,
inform them without disclosing too much so they can really help? I guess you see what I'm saying? Because in order
yeah,
for me to
yeah.
know how to handle you, I almost have to know to a certain extent what's going on, I guess. But yet at
Well,
the same time, you don't want people, everybody knowing everybody's business.
yeah. I think I don't think that there has to be a knowing. I think what is important is the facilitation of just general empathy,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
and my ability, and this is something we foster, my ability to feel what you feel and see what you see and experience what you experience without having to actively live your life. Just allowing
Okay.
myself to both emotionally and spiritually come to where you're postured and experience what you experience. I think that, just as a general baseline, is a great starting place when we're trying to determine how to handle and how to support and how to be there, because I don't have to know your whole testimony in order
Hmm.
to see that you are being tested.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right.
I
Okay.
don't I don't I don't I don't have to know, that you lost your baby last week, your uncle got shot.
Hmm.
I don't have to know you just got laid off and all this happened in a month. I don't have to know that to see that you're being confronted with
Okay.
just some real hardship. And I think if we just move from a place of needing to know, particularly in a remember, mental illness, that's medical, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I don't I'm not privy to anything
Right.
unless you tell me. All
Right.
right. And if you tell me as a pastor, as a clinician, then I'm
Hmm.
bound by confidentiality. I think the same is
Right.
true within the household of faith. That how do I let the saints know? Well, you don't let the saints know. That's for that person to share or not share
Hmm.
at their own discretion. They shared it with you because of who you
Right.
are, but also likely because they know their laws
Hmm.
in place to
Right.
protect them.
Right.
And so I don't think we have to, nor should we put out, unless we're going to do this across the board for all saints, put
But
out
I
what
guess that's
somebody's
the key. Right.
being confronted with, and instead simply acknowledge our brother, our sister is being challenged. Now let's be the church.
And I think that's that phrase right there. If we just be the church,
Yeah.
the loving, caring, prayerful, discerning community,
Mhm.
without knowing specifics, you'll
Yeah.
just know how to treat people. And
How about
therefore
that?
providing much of that support that you're talking about that the church should
Yeah.
provide. Let me ask this question, and I want to go back to the beginning of your career, and I think this goes back to the ideal world of collaboration. Is there, and you may have even shared this even as we've talked, has there been an ideal way that a church or the church has utilized you, or is there a way that you sit back and said, man, this is my dream of how the church should use me? Because one of the issues sometimes even in the Black Apostolic Pentecostal Church, we get the degrees,
Hmm.
but because we're not utilized, we're then drawn elsewhere. I was like, hey, why didn't you let me see that contract before you signed it?
Yeah.
Well, but wait a minute, you gotta look right on your team. And I imagine there's gotta be some in your mind, you're envisioning this, I guess, symbiotic relationship where this is how ideally I could or would want to help the church. So for some pastor that's watching, what would be the ideal way for you to be utilized?
I think the ideal way for me to be utilized, and prayerfully, if the Lord tarries, we'll be able to manifest this in our little corner, is in a preventive capacity. And by
Okay.
that I mean not being called in when there's need for intervention or
Hmm.
crisis, or when the bottom fell out, and
Hmm.
we need somebody to come and work a miracle.
Hmm.
But to be brought in, whether as a staffer, whether as a volunteer, whether as someone who just comes on a regular basis, um,
Hmm.
to actually engage in the preventive mental health care that is so vital
Okay.
for
Okay.
pastors and for their teams, to really bring me in or bring others like me in,
Hmm.
to check the pulse of the mental health of everybody serving, and not just everybody serving.
Right.
That's where you start, but even opening it up to the laity. And this is a mental health, not just awareness
Hmm. Hmm.
moment. This is a preventive moment, because you may think you
Hmm.
are just like we all do when we go to the doctor, right? Or
Right.
avoid going to the doctor. No matter
Right.
where you
Right.
where you follow that spectrum, we have
Right.
this notion of, well, I know I'm good, I'm all right, or I know I'm not good, and I don't want to be confronted with it. I think that preventive mental health component allows you to come to face with somebody you don't have a dual relationship with. You know, I'm gonna be leaving here. You may not have to
Right.
see me again, but it allows me to confidentially share with you, hey, you're doing okay here, but this part, that's a slippery slope. And
Okay.
I want us to I want you to strengthen that. Or your social well-being
Mm.
is wonderful, but you're using it potentially as a cover for your emotional and psychological duress. And that duress may cause daily disruption and bring you into the world of mental illness. Right now we're talking mental health. There are
Mm.
symptoms, right?
Right.
But not yet a diagnosable condition. So can we, I think that would be ideal, to come in preventively,
Okay.
before the house is on fire. Just that would be
And
ideal.
I feel good because we have you tonight, but
Yes,
you're coming to City of Refuge in August for our youth conference to do that.
thank God, thank God. Yes,
So good, good. I know I'm on the right track there. Now, you mentioned about some of the negative things that people in church said about you going in this profession, but obviously you didn't. You ignored them, or at least
yeah,
went
yeah,
ahead and moved forward anyway.
yeah.
How did you make that decision? Or as my wife asked the question, what made you go into this field in spite of the resistance and perhaps lack of support and even direct criticism um, for what you did?
Yeah. So, great question. I certainly ignored them and pushed past them, and I have to, give credit to Um, my my pastor at the time, when I was at that part of my life and navigating my collegiate journey, he placed a supreme emphasis. It was in a ministry context, but the principle is transferable to my academic pursuits as well. He placed and continues to place a emphasis on calling.
Mm-hmm.
You really knowing and sitting with before you launch into a tirade to him talking about, you called to preach and you ready to,
Mm-hmm.
make your pathway to licensing and ordination. He's gonna spend a whole lot of time with you on calling.
Mm-hmm.
And his prerogative was that you're going to need an assurance that it is God that has brought you to this place in order to endure, sustain successfully the journey called ministry. And I
Mm-hmm.
took that same principle and said, if I'm going to do this, I have to have a sense of calling. It has to be God pushing me. It has to be God prompting me. It has to be God pulling me. And once I became anchored in that assurance,
Mm-hmm.
it was nothing anybody could say to deter
Good.
me. So I think what took me beyond calling
Mm-hmm.
is just a respect for the power that the mind has over the body. Mental health care
Mm-hmm.
is foundational to all other parts or expression of healthcare being as significant as they possibly can on the outcome of that individual. I'm not saying that without mental health care, you can't have health care in any other space.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying
Right.
is that when your mental health care is neglected,
Right.
all other components of one's health are sort of capped. They aren't operating at maximum capacity. Even your spiritual health care.
Right.
It's Paul the apostle in Romans who says to be renewed by the transforming of your, okay,
Right.
y'all know the Bible. So it is not it is
Right.
not to suggest that you can't, be a wonderful disciple and progress and
Right.
grow in the Lord, or that you can't have amazing physical health, or that you can't have relational and social health that is proficient. What I'm saying is that you're nowhere near where you could be if your mental health care is neglected. And so I think just the power that the mind has over the body, and the fact that God designed it to be so,
Right.
that it wasn't accidental. There's no evolutionary process that explains why the mind now has, no, it's always been that way.
Right.
Part of being in his image and likeness is the mind having governing capacity over the body. That if one's mind can be thrust forward in a direction, one's body and the rest of that self will flow with it. um, Thinking also about just the resilience. You talked about the resilience factor earlier. Always been amazed at just how resilient the mind is.
Mm-hmm.
I also, in my current um, title and one of my current positions, I cover intensive outpatient groups. So I do
Mm-hmm.
group therapy as well for individuals who are grappling with addiction and maybe
Mm-hmm.
have a co-occurring um, disorder where they have both addiction and addiction diagnosis and a mental health diagnosis. And one of the things that we so often flesh out is the elasticity of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
How the brain, without getting heady in jargon, how the brain has a amazing ability to snap back if
Mm-hmm.
left alone.
Wow.
That means
Wow.
somebody who has been addicted to alcohol for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, and their brain has suffered as a result. The brain has an amazing ability to snap back if you, guess what, stop drinking.
Right. 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 Your
It
liver
it
might not, but your brain will.
but your brain will. You see, I said brain because I'm staying in my lane.
Right. Right.
I'm not a
Right.
liver doctor. I stay in my lane. But your
Right.
your your brain will snap back and will begin to
Mm-hmm.
return to its form. And while your brain is snapping back, you pair that with therapy, or you pair that with treatment. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're not only allowing your brain to reset, but your entire life is being reset. So I'm just intrigued by how resilient the mind is when we stop harming the mind and start helping it. It really has an ability to snap back, and take us to a psychological state that may have just seemed elusive while we were actively harming the brain.
Hmm.
If we just leave it alone and provided some support, it can really snap back.
While you're watching, and we're almost at the top of the hour, we only got a few minutes left for this interview. Like, invite, share, tag someone that's interested in this field, this profession, perhaps your pastor, your youth leader, youth pastor. Uh, Include them in on this conversation. Maybe teachers or parents or guidance counselors. Well, they already trained, but bring them in on this conversation as well tonight. Uh, your title, you're a licensed professional counselor, but
Yes.
your specific job title now is clinician and psychotherapist.
Therapist. Yes.
What is that?
So the senior clinician piece deals with one of my job functions where I serve um, here in one of the local county governments in Northern Virginia. I serve as a case manager, as a supportive counselor, as an outpatient therapist, and a group therapist. So it's all kind of jumbled into one. And the reason is because of the agency that I work for in this particular role. We support um, individuals in our net that have basically fallen through other nets. We're sort of
Okay.
that last layer of outpatient support. And so individuals come to us with a variety of needs. And so if they need just someone to help them negotiate more of an independent, sustainable life, i.e., a case manager, then
Hmm.
I serve them that way. If they need supportive counseling, someone to maybe kind of help them navigate as they are reintegrating society from maybe a hospitalization or incarceration,
Okay.
then I can be that for them. If they need traditional outpatient therapy and not case management, then I can be that for them and use a variety of therapeutic models to take them on a therapeutic journey until they get to a place where they, essentially don't feel like they need me anymore in that capacity. And so that's the senior clinician is a whole lot of things kind of boiled into one. But again, we sort of have to be because we're that last net for the uninsured. We're the last net for the underemployed or unemployed. We're that place um, where if every other entity has told them no, we're expected to tell them yes. So we have to be that sort of for the population that we serve. The psychotherapist portion um, and this is my before going into this is my plug for anybody that's engaging in um, therapy or is interested in pursuing outpatient therapy. Once you get into the actual grind of doing the work and you're entertaining maybe taking on some more of the work, my encouragement to you is never do in obligation number two the exact thing you do in obligation number one. You'll thank me later. So obligation number two, as a psychotherapist, that's purely outpatient therapy, but
Okay.
it's with a very different population. Purely individual. I do individual couples and families, but I'm dealing with individuals um, who are who have different needs and of a different at a different space in their mental health care journey. And they also tend to place a different value on the work.
Okay.
So you're dealing with a different speed, and I can appreciate both by navigating both.
Two questions. How long have you been in the profession, and how long did it take you to get in the profession? I know you're a graduate of Johnson C. Smith
Hmm.
University. You have your degree in psychology,
Yeah, my bachelor's in psychology. Yep,
and Liberty University is where you have your counseling degree.
master's in marriage and family therapy. Yep.
Okay,
Hmm.
so that's a total of how many years?
Oh my.
Four plus two, 4 plus 3.
4 plus 3, so seven
Okay.
7 years of that. So I've been in the field for 12 years. I started um, as an employee in an inpatient psychiatric hospital and matriculated from there. So I started on the other side of things,
Okay.
and I ended up on this side. Did some intensive in-home counseling work, some treatment foster care work, and then ended up where I am right now in local government, and then of course branching out into private practice. So it took me. I graduated with my master's in 2015,
Mhm.
but you have to accrue post master um, supervised hours. So you
Okay.
have to essentially practice under the
Mhm.
guidance of a licensed professional. You have to get so many hours and pass an examination. So I didn't clear all of that
Mhm.
until about 2019. So I've only
Wow.
been licensed, fully licensed for a few years, provisionally licensed for a couple years prior to that. So it's a long road for a reason, but I'm
Right.
thankful. I'm thankful to be at this part of the road for sure.
But I think it's so important because when you hear the level of training and hours spent, and this is your full-time
Mhm.
occupation, I'm going to ask you a question about a post in
Okay.
which you kind of said some of y'all bootlegging self-made so-called. See, he didn't say all that, but in so many words,
Why did
all
my
y'all
mind go
fake
right back there?
phony counselors out here. I got the real.
Oh my, oh my.
So I mean, so what would be the, I guess, to clean it up? What would you say is, even if someone is a trained Christian counselor, what is it they? I'm going to say, what is it they is, and what is it they ain't compared to what you are?
So it's a shame my mind went right back to that post. Out of all the posts that I made, it's you didn't even have to give it to me verbatim. I know. Oh man, I was on one that day. I don't know what was going on, but but seriously, it goes just back to knowing your role and knowing your limitations and being honest about them.
Mhm,
So the difference between, again, a counselor and a therapist, very basically, at a very base level, is that a therapist, a licensed professional therapist, is someone that has been trained and been equipped and been authorized to deal with diagnosable mental, emotional, behavioral, and addiction related illnesses.
mhm,
A counselor is someone who may have the skills and ability to support one with regard to their questions and challenges that relate to daily living, that relate to dealing with general stressors, that relate to the symptoms, as I was
mhm.
talking about, of illnesses. So I
Okay.
think if you're a Christian counselor, it's okay and appropriate for you to address symptoms that may be presenting
Mhm,
at a minimal, at a low to mid level. But when those symptoms present as an illness, that's the part for you to, this is beyond me. I need to
right.
connect you to this. For instance, depression,
Mhm,
everybody likes to throw that around, clinical depression, but the actual diagnoses can range and vary. You know, MDD being one of the major depressive disorder, or um, persistent depressive disorder, previously known as dysthymia. You know, those are two distinct depressive disorders that carry symptoms
mhm,
within those disorders that you have to have a certain number before you can actually be diagnosed, and it has to occur during a certain amount of time. And so there's criteria. So
mhm,
if someone is just presenting with a low and depressed mood, well, that doesn't
mhm.
necessarily mean that they have major depressive disorder if that's the only thing
Right.
they're presenting with. So a
Okay.
Christian counselor, I think, can support someone who's experiencing a low, sad, depressed mood. That's not
Right.
an abnormal emotion for anyone to experience. So
Right.
I think once you begin to wade in waters that are dealing
Mhm.
with illness as a counselor, you need to
Okay.
refer. And even therapists have limitations. So it's not like the therapists are the one all be all, bring me
Right.
anything and I can deal with it. I worry, and I would tell anyone to beware of a therapist who doesn't have any limitations. Their posture to you is they can handle everything. Run,
Right.
because
Because you
no.
said family therapists, adolescent, I guess teens. You have those
Yes,
who deal with marriage, who deal
yes.
with the mental disorders.
Hmm.
So once again, you got people who specialize in
Yeah.
even certain types of issues or diagnoses. You mentioned earlier about how it's almost becoming numb to everything that's going on in
Yeah.
the world, and the brain somehow being able to deal with that. And I want to ask you, and I kind of give you a heads up on it.
Mhm.
As a pastor, as a clinician, we had the mass shooting in Texas.
Yeah.
You had the mass shooting in Buffalo. And you don't have to get into the politics as much, but I do want to hear from a pastor who is also a professional in the medical field. Is it a gun issue, a sin issue, or a mental health issue?
It's absolutely a sin issue and a gun issue, but not a mental health issue. And I'll take you back to the delineation of mental health from mental illness that I provided earlier.
Hmm.
Um, Mental health, of course, deals with one's current status with regard to their psychological, emotional, and social well being,
Hmm.
um, impacting uh, your ability to think, feel, and behave, but not limited to those things. So, when someone engages in a mass shooting, we're dealing theologically, of course, with the pervasive noetic impact of sin,
Hmm.
original sin, actual sin, it all being profoundly present, and a reminder that violence is one of the expressions of sin.
Hmm.
The taking of life, murdering, in any capacity, um, again, can be a reminder of the fact that we're all depraved in that particular way. Um, However, when you talk about someone being able to engage in that using a resource that continues to be a common denominator, you're talking about guns, you're talking about firearms. Um, the question then becomes, if we believe that, as some suggest, it's not the gun, it's the people. There's a
Hmm.
sin issue with the person. The person's the
Hmm.
problem, not the gun. Then my question becomes, well, then why, if people are the problem, are we putting resources in the hands of the problem to create more problems?
Hmm.
So if the person's the problem, then let's deal with the availability of this tool to, just execute endlessly
Hmm.
in ways that don't simply chill the average
Right.
citizen, but
Right.
apparently, Texas revealed to us it chills those who've been trained to actually engage
Right.
in that world.
There you go. There you go.
Um, and so it is a sin problem, it is a gun problem, but it is not a mental health problem. And the problem um, that exists when we go straight to mental health is, number one, mental health is not synonymous with mental illness. Mental
Right.
health includes everybody. Mental illness includes some folks, some
I
people.
felt like I needed to edit that question once you've educated me tonight. So,
It's,
like,
just-
oh
it's,
man.
it's that's some people. That ain't everybody. But even among the some,
Uh-huh.
this is the perpetuation of stigma that happens in mass shootings, and we are not sensitive to it. Um, or even acts of terror that maybe
Hmm.
aren't mass shootings, is when they're of a certain context.
Hmm.
There's often that rush to
Hmm.
mental health, and that
Right.
perpetuates the stigma that individuals who are mentally ill are more violent than those who are not mentally ill.
Hmm. Hmm.
When the
Hmm.
truth is, there is an extremely low percentage of individuals who grapple with mental illness that are violent.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
the notion and suggestion, it goes back to the point you made earlier in the interview, that from a church, but even societal role, that when we don't understand, it's easy to just ostracize, dismiss, and
Hmm.
lump into this monolith category. And
Hmm.
now what we are subconsciously dealing with is the lie that we've embraced as truth, that mental ill is equivalent to violent,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
does what? Inform even more of a resistance, even more
Hmm.
of a disdain, even more of a mishandling. When the truth of the matter is, we're not dealing with someone statistically who is likely
Mhm.
operating in violence because
Right.
of their mental illness. Let's say mental illness is present. It may
Mhm.
be present as a contributing factor along with several others, but it is not just the mental illness alone, statistically, that is
Right.
going to push someone to perpetuate an act of violence at the level of taking an AR-15 and shooting their grandmother and shooting 19, 20 individuals with more coming in, or any other example that you wanna drum up. So that's my perspective, is that we're dealing with sin gun, but not mental health issue. And if there is a mental health issue, it's the need for us to be much more preventative and
Mhm.
less driven by intervention, less driven by crisis, less
Right.
reactionary, and very much anticipating the need for mental health care before the need even presents itself.
Because I would imagine, and you can't, like you said, lump everybody together, but you do have statistics. But if a person is medically depressed,
Hmm.
they're more likely to withdraw from everybody. And if anything, perhaps take their own life, not necessarily get a machine gun to take dozens of lives. Is that kind of what you're saying? Or
Well,
my,
well,
my
not necessarily, because I think I think that's another misunderstanding, and it's part of what you were mentioning earlier about our just how much we don't know about the brain,
right,
about mental
right.
processes, about emotional presentations,
Mhm.
um, because there are individuals who present exactly the way you just mentioned.
Mhm.
Um, and then there are individuals who we might refer to as depressed but functional.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
don't withdraw, they
Right.
don't pull away. To look at them, you
Right.
would think
Right.
they've never been depressed a day in their life.
Right. Right.
And part of that can sometimes stem from um, a lack of support or lack of feeling there is an opportunity for them to actually feel what they're feeling and just sit with the symptom. For instance, you live alone, you work, you pay all your bills. You, if you don't do it, it won't be done. But for a lot of
Mhm.
people, that creates the ground of, I gotta function,
Right.
even though I'm
Right.
feeling and dealing. So it doesn't make
Right.
them any less depressed, but it does
Right.
make it more difficult, as you mentioned, to detect, because it doesn't hit the textbook of, well, they should be withdrawn, they should be sleeping all day, they should be
Mhm.
staying out of light, they should,
Mhm.
they should not want to eat, or they should be eating too much, they should not
Mhm.
be when it doesn't look that way, it's more difficult to detect, but that doesn't mean it's any less real or less profound.
You mentioned about the role of the church, not just the leaders, but the congregation, that almost, I guess, a Martin Luther King beloved community, that supportive community. And we understand you're not Christian counselors, you're not trained
Yeah.
therapists or what have you, but we're today's Memorial Day, which we're commemorating those who have lost their lives for
Mhm.
this country, early teens, late teens, early 20s, young
Yeah.
men and women. You have the mass shootings,
Mhm.
but you also have everyday shootings that are taking place, especially in our urban areas,
Mhm.
all the time. What is the right thing or the wrong thing to say to perhaps a parent who has lost a child to gun violence, whether it's in a gang related incident, mass shooting, or even defending the country of war? Is there this certain any guidance? Because we're
Sure.
good for in trying to help. We often hurt because we put our foot in our mouths.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and I at least want to, Pastor, can you help us get our foot out the mouth to where we at least don't say the dumb, wrong thing? Is
Yeah.
there something that is good to say or absolutely bad to say to a surviving family member of someone who has had this experience?
For sure. For sure. I think a guiding principle in determining how best to support um, the grieving, whether you're talking about complex or something that is more single episode, is to ask yourself before you say or do, or decide not to say or do, to ask yourself this guiding question. Am I about to say or do, or am I choosing to not say or do what I'm prepared to say or do to this person for my comfort or theirs?
Mm. Wow.
And the reason that's so important is because, for example, if we were in the same room and one of us started crying, right?
Mm-hmm.
The default, almost natural urge for either one of us or anyone in the room would be to do what?
Right.
Give you some
Right.
tissue,
There you go. Stop that crying. Yeah.
pat your back,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
embrace you, tell you everything's going to be all right. And the question that always strikes me when I observe that or when we're in situations that seem to support that, who exactly is the comfort for?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Am I
Mm-hmm.
telling you to dry your eyes because your tears make me uncomfortable?
Wow.
Or
Wow.
am I offering this to make you feel better? Am I
Wow.
am I consoling you because I'm uncomfortable with
Mm-hmm.
someone being sad around me?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I consoling you because it's really about you? And I think that has to be, first of all, the guiding principle. Before I say or do it, am I doing it for my comfort or theirs? And secondly, to understand in the context of the question you pose, to understand that we're not dealing with black and white here.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing
Mm-hmm.
with nuance and gray.
Mm-hmm.
That the best thing you can do for someone who is grieving the loss of a family member or a friend in a mass shooting, someone that has been directly impacted by their family member or friend being lost at war,
Mm-hmm.
just brutally murdered in just the everyday
Right.
of living as a civilian.
Right.
Um, Police shooting, drive-by shooting, whatever, right?
Right.
Stabbing, it doesn't matter.
Then you go in
I
COVID. I
think
mean, there's a lot going
then
on.
going COVID, right? I, the best thing you can do, the best thing that I can do, I think is, and not to be redundant, is to approach and engage with empathy,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
listen, to listen, and to love. Now, I didn't say anything in any of those three: empathy,
Uh-huh.
listen,
Somebody put that in the comments.
and love. Empathy, put yourself where they are so you
Mm-hmm.
can feel, shoulder, and appreciate where they sit without judgment, without trying to end the moment, without trying to extend the moment. I'm going to come alongside and I'm going to just be where you are so I can absorb what you're absorbing. Then you want to listen. And this isn't just listening to what is said, but listening to what is not said, attending to in the clinical world, we engage in something called active listening, where we listen to what you're communicating, but we also listen to your posture, your
Mm-hmm.
nonverbal communication. We
Mm-hmm.
we listen to your speech tone and your speech volume. We listen to not just what you say, but how you say it. We listen to your comfort or discomfort with eye contact. We listen to how you sit, whether you're open or you're closed. We listen to how you come in from the moment you show up to the
Mm-hmm.
moment I'm giving you free game. From the moment you show up to the moment you leave, we're engaged in listening to your presentation and what is communicating to us. All right. So someone who is under that immense amount of grief, you can, especially from a faith perspective, you can anticipate
Mm-hmm.
that when they're ready to talk, they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna have a lot to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it ain't gonna all be pretty. It's not gonna all be boxed in. It's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna all be respective
Mm-hmm.
because they're respectful. They're hurting. So when you hear questions like, "Where was your God?
Mm-hmm.
Why did He let this happen?
Mm-hmm.
How can you sit there serving a God who would let this happen?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't understand. Nobody understands. I don't want to live."
Mm-hmm.
That empathy, that listen, and that love, I think, should drive us to affirming that their feelings are valid
Hmm.
and they're understandable.
Wow.
That's it. Not they're right. That's black and
Uh-huh.
white. Not they're wrong,
Hmm.
but they are valid and they're understandable. And you know what else? Not only is what you're feeling valid and understandable, not only is your perspective valid and understandable, but I don't know is an acceptable, empathetic response to someone
Mm.
who's grieving.
We like to be the know-it-all.
Why? Thank you. Why did they get shot and
Hmm.
not them?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why did God? I don't know. Why didn't he? I don't know.
Wow.
And there's power in what we call therapeutic silence. So even being able to, and this is where the empathy, listening, and loving
Hmm.
comes into place, because sitting in therapeutic silence isn't the same thing as doing nothing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Sometimes just being silently supportive of someone, silently present with someone is more powerful than you lecturing them for 30 minutes about how they need to look to the hills from whence their help cometh from.
And that's biblical because we all say that's where Job's friends messed up.
Yeah, we say that and then we turn around and act like
And
Job's
dude,
friends.
Job's friends.
That's right. That's right.
Just talk and don't know what you're talking about, trying to speak on behalf of God, and God had to come back and say, I didn't tell you to say any of that. You
And you're
know,
doing all of that for your own comfort. You ain't doing it for them.
because they didn't know how to handle
That's it.
what Job. So Bible gives you
Come on.
examples in support of what the professionals is
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. That's it.
Come on, Hoya. That's why you need to connect with this man of God. I'm gonna ask my wife to put your website, your Instagram social media handle, as well as your Cash App. This man of God. If he says something that's blessed you tonight, you want to get him to come to your church or your conference. I assume you do virtual and in person
Yes, sir.
seminars, sessions, or what have you. He is an asset to the kingdom. You are a pastor. Tell us about your church.
Yes. So privileged to shepherd Calvary Apostolic Community Church. Will be celebrating 6 years of life here in August. We are a ministry in the southernmost part of Northern Virginia. Apostolic Pentecostal, according to the scriptures, we are a going church for a coming Lord, place of healing for hurting people. And if you or anyone you know is ever in need of being lifted in any way, whether you walk through our doors or not, we love the opportunity to serve you in the way that God has graced us. So come rock with us.
I have never heard Fredericksburg referred to as the most southern part of Northern Virginia.
The southernmost part of Northern Virginia. A lot of people give me resistance for that, but I'm going with it.
But it
That
makes
that
sense
that
because
is that is
that's
what
about
I've
the
learned.
furthest you can live and still commute to DC.
It is. It is. Yeah. We'll get a lot of respect for it, but it's true. It's true. It's true.
So for somebody that I don't know where Northern Virginia, Southern Virginia is, he's on 95, Fredericksburg.
See, see
Before
how
you get
Richmond
to
folk do
DC,
it.
he's between DC and Richmond.
That's it. Right in between. An hour separates us both. Yep. Yep.
I love it. I love it. What do you ultimately want to accomplish in life and ministry? You're off to a great start, but what is your end goal?
Oh man, I just want to, it may sound cliche, but I just want to die empty, man. I want to pour out everything that I have, and I want to leave, if the Lord wills, I want to leave legacy for my children. So I'd love to um, emerge and engage in ultimately launching my own um, private practice and sort of network of practices of sorts, just to really merge the not just theology with psychology, but also the underrepresentation of individuals that look like me in the field, particularly in terms of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
would love to be able to do that. I actually envision engaging in therapy much longer than I'll be in pastoring. If the Lord says the same, it's his role, it's his job, it's his call. But that's my plan and my trajectory. Um, and
That was
certainly
one of
just
my questions. Do you see yourself pastoring and counseling forever? You already answered counseling
yeah,
forever, but not necessarily pastor.
not necessarily pastoring. If the Lord wills, I believe in something that you are a strong component and have demonstrable expertise in succession. And because it is the work of the Lord, no man, no woman has the right to hold it beyond their time. And I look at the biblical model of mandated retirement in the Old
Mhm,
Testament,
mhm,
among those that served in the work of the Lord, mandated, built in. I
mhm.
don't care how you feeling. I don't care if you got your title late. Doesn't matter if you just getting your due. The word of the Lord was sure and was true. And I think that principle, as pervasive as it was, has been lost. As much as we say, this is about Him, we don't always believe what we proclaim, and so we'll make things about us that are really about Him. And I'm as much as I love serving Him and love doing what I'm doing, it ain't mine.
Mhm.
And so I'm already at the right young age of I'm not telling you. I'm I'm already just looking at, Lord, help me to do this part right, and not be one of those who holds on beyond when I knew I should have let go because I don't have anything else to go to.
Are there one or two key things that you do for your own mental health? You carry the weight of your patients,
Yes.
carry the weight of your parishioners. You're building a ministry. You're a husband, three children. Where do you take your load?
Mm. So I, as you can see behind me, I like to practice something that I think is advantageous for every pastor and entrepreneur, and that is what we call self-soothing skills. So self-soothing is just about learning to bring, not wait, but
Mhm,
learning to bring goodness, relaxation, and relief into your own world. So often we wait for that to come. We wait
mhm.
for somebody to bring it. We wait for our wife. We wait for our husband. We wait for a parishioner. We wait for that vacation time. We're always waiting for that. And self soothing takes us down a different road where you actively pursue and you bring that into your own world. So I like to, um, no doubt, encourage and practice for myself the sort of sensory directive. You want to know how you can self-soothe. I begin with the sensory directive. Think about your five senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing, and going through each one of those senses, really exploring, for instance, with hearing, what sounds bring me goodness, relief, relaxation, soothing. And
Mhm.
then you pursue those sounds. Smells. Are there any smells that soothe me, that comfort me, that bring me goodness, that bring me relaxation? So I like to, and you just go down the sensory roadmap, and that's a great way to build just a beginning sort
I
of
like
skill bank for you to, when you're feeling yourself ratcheting up, you go to my senses. All right, what
wow.
can I bring? Maybe
Mhm,
it's a candle that you like to smell in your home. Maybe
mhm,
it's a certain soap. Maybe it's, for some people it's soothing to go people watch.
mhm.
Just go somewhere and watch people go how they go, and that brings you goodness and relaxation. You
That's
got
the
your own
old
stuff.
folks sitting on the porch watching the cars go by.
They knew what they were doing. That's why they would get up on the porch at 6 in the morning and they'd sit there
And
because
this
they knew
white,
what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They didn't call it what we call it, but they knew what they were doing. There was something therapeutic in that about them.
uh-huh.
In the South, that's why you got the whole wave when everybody goes by.
Yeah,
No, nobody knows who it is, but we're
that's
just
a
waving.
southern thing. My wife don't get it.
Again,
Why are you
I get
waving
it,
to strangers?
but again, that's a therapeutic. It has a therapeutic benefit. So I like to, um, exercise. I like to certainly. I've got a 18-month-old American bully, so I spend a lot of time with him. He's great at absorbing all of whatever I bring. He's just so him, and he don't care what the day was. When he sees me, his day's made. And then I certainly like to just practice being mindful, and that is to be, particularly as pastors, our
Hmm.
brains can often be very future, very past, very over here, over there, and being mindful just teaches me to be no other place than where my feet are, to
Wow.
not be judgmental, to
Hmm.
not try to extend moments. Don't try to recreate moments. Don't try to stop moments. Just let whatever is, let it be, knowing that it's going to eventually give way to something else. And so if I am, for instance, watching the NBA finals,
Hmm.
that's all I'm doing. I'm not watching and texting. I'm not
Uh-huh.
watching any I'm just going,
Right.
that's all I'm doing. And I'm gonna just enjoy whatever that moment brings. And I try to model that. You can't do that 24/7, but as much as you can,
See,
Lady
see, when,
Travis,
when your method of proven becomes an addiction, then we have another issue.
got a whole nother issue. Yeah, yeah. We got a whole other issue.
The
But
coping
again,
mechanism is counterproductive. No.
if it brings you goodness, relaxation, and rejuvenation, then it's something that I think can be not just helpful but preventative. It keeps you from going down that road of crisis, that road of overwhelm, that road of um, a split or breaking of sorts.
Wow, man of God, I thank you for this interview. I thank you for the
Been a pleasure.
information. I believe that you've helped us to help you as the body of Christ, even us to help our coworkers, our neighbors, our family members,
Thank
and,
God.
and friends. And I invite you to connect with Pastor Hoyle, follow him on social media. If you're passing through Virginia and you're in the area, visit his church. He's both in person and online, so you can always visit his ministry online. You can sow into him and into his ministry, and so, once again, we're grateful to you for what you're offering the kingdom.
Thank God.
Before we log off, we want to let you know about our upcoming guests. On June 13th, we have Pastor Abraham Bellinger from First Fruits Community Church in South Carolina. And then we will have our season finale of the second season of Mantle Mondays with the founder of the Young Leaders Conference, Elder Mark Moore Jr., will
Mhm.
be our season finale on Monday, June 27th. So if you need a text reminder of when we air our Mantle Mondays, you can text the word mantle to 833-450-0056. All of our episodes that are originally airing on our platform starting in June will be rebroadcast on the YLC TV network on those platforms starting in June. So if you didn't catch this one on my platforms, you'll be able to catch it later this summer on those platforms. So we
Bless
invite you to
God.
connect with us in those ways. So at this time, I'm going to give it over to Pastor Hoyle just to give any closing thoughts or words of encouragement or just advice to the body of Christ. Close us out in prayer. Once again, we thank God for all of you that have watched Mantle Mondays tonight, and we pray that this conversation has been a blessing to you and to yours. Good night and God bless.
Amen. Well, thank you for those who have been able to hang with us for any portion of tonight. I just wanted to come real quickly as time has eluded us and just encourage everyone regarding the reality of the time that we're living in and the rigors that we're all being confronted. I just want to encourage you regarding reality that this is not normal, uh, and that uh, I recognize and realize that you are doing the best that you can to navigate a very abnormal space and time. In the midst of that abnormality, I want to encourage every single person that's listening um, to pursue professional therapy. Therapy is for everybody. It's not just for those who are grappling with mental illness. It's for all of us who are confronted with our mental health. And I don't want for you to wait until things go bad before you seek out what could bless you. Just as we um, don't encourage individuals to wait until things are at a breaking point to seek the Lord Jesus Christ, so we do the same with regard to your mental health. And so everybody needs a therapist, and you can pursue therapy at your own pace. You as someone receiving services, you have a voice, and you can certainly utilize that voice and pick a frequency that works for you. And I'm just of the opinion that if you connect certainly with a therapist that fits you, you're going to be really surprised at just how profoundly you'll be blessed by bringing what you've been holding and hiding from everyone else and laying it in the context of a session with someone who's been trained to help guide you, not fix you, to help guide you down the road of wellness and wholeness with regard to your psychology, your emotional self, and your uh, social self. That's all I wanted to share, and just encourage everybody to please take your mental health from awareness to action. Now that you are aware, or you're beginning that process of becoming aware, please pursue that next step and reach out to someone who is trained to help you unravel and work through those things that may be confronting you in ways that you know not of. And once you have done that to the degree you feel like you need to, please turn around and be an advocate for someone else to walk down that same road and receive the support that comes from the mental health counseling world. God bless you. We're going to ask the Lord's blessings. I believe that's what Bishop wanted us to do on our time, as well as all of you tonight. And please be sure to come back next time, June 13th, certainly, and June 27th for the remaining two Mantle Mondays of this particular season. Lord Jesus, we love you and honor you and thank you for this evening, this time, this space, in this place. Our prayer is that you were pleased, you were glorified, and that the lives of those that you are yet actively working in were improved because of what they were exposed to tonight. Bless and make a blessing as we navigate this abnormally stressful time, as we navigate trauma after trauma, as we navigate disconnect after disconnect. You said you sent your word and you healed us. Thank you for the word that heals upon impact, and thank you for the word that launches us into the direction of a professional, that you might use them to further that healing. Help us now, God, to walk out what we have received tonight and be healthier, be whole, be even more advocates, even more active advocates for our wellness and the wellness of those that you have called us to. That's the human family. It's in the name of the Lord Jesus we do pray and give thanks. Amen. God bless you.
Looking to start a church, business, or nonprofit organization in 2022? Do you need help forming an LLC, applying for a copyright or trademark, revising church laws, crafting a succession plan, or developing a compensation package for your pastor and staff? Contact the law office of Travell Travis, a Richmond-based legal boutique focused on the needs of pastors, entrepreneurs, creatives, and our community. Let's make your vision a reality in 2022. Visit TravellTravis.com. That's TRAVELL Travis.com. If you're concerned about the future of your organization when you step down, then where will the mantle fall? A biblical and legal guide to succession planning is a must-read for you. It delves into the scriptural and legal aspect of succession planning, characteristics of successors, the people, the process, church bylaws, common myths, even issues with nepotism. Where will the mantle fall? Written by Richmond's own attorney, Pastor Travell Travis, and available at Amazon.com.